I got back home on a Sunday evening, after a long, exhausting week on base. It wasn't deployment, but it wasn't a vacation either. I'd been running drills in the heat, sleeping 4 hours a night, and dealing with constant pressure from my commanding officer. So when I finally got that short window of leave, all I wanted was peace. I pulled into the neighborhood in my buddy's car. He dropped me off, and for a moment everything looked normal. Same lawns, same mailboxes, same perfect little world the HOA worked so hard to keep spotless. Except one thing was missing. My Jeep. My heart jumped. I stood there, blinking at the empty space in front of my house. I checked again, then again. It was gone. At first, I thought it had been stolen. My hands were already reaching for my phone to call the police, but something didn't add up. There was no glass on the ground, no sign of a break-in, no tire marks like it had been driven off in a hurry. It felt too clean. I called the non-emergency line anyway, gave them my plate. After a few minutes on hold, the operator came back and said something that made my blood boil. Your vehicle was towed, by request of the homeowners association. I didn't even say thank you. I hung up. Why? Why would the HOA tow my Jeep? It wasn't broken down. It wasn't leaking oil. I had parked it in front of my house, like always, and I had written permission from the board from back when I first moved in. It made no sense. I felt my throat tighten, my fists clenched without me realizing it. The HOA had towed my vehicle, a military-issued federally registered Jeep, one that was still listed as active use under my orders, and they had no idea what they had just done. I should probably explain something about this Jeep. It's not just a regular vehicle, it's government-issued, a matte green, no frills, tough as nails machine that's been through more than most people ever will. It still has the military-grade GPS unit installed, bullet-resistant panels, a reinforced undercarriage. No, it's not some fancy civilian copy. This thing is the real deal, assigned to me under active duty transport status. That matters a lot. When a vehicle is registered under federal military use, it can't just be removed or impounded like any old car. There are protocols, clearances, legal layers that prevent this exact kind of thing. Towing that kind of vehicle without notifying the base or the military chain of command, that's a big mistake, a costly one. But none of that seemed to matter to the HOA. When I first moved into this neighborhood 2 years ago, I made sure everything was above board. I'm not a troublemaker. I try to follow the rules. So I notified the HOA that I was active duty, that I'd be deploying off and on, and that my assigned military vehicle would sometimes be parked out front during my leave periods. They gave me written permission. I still have the email. I even printed it and kept a hard copy in the glove compartment. I didn't want to take any chances. Of course I got the usual looks. People in the neighborhood gave those half smiles, the kind where they're pretending to be polite, but really judging you. Some asked if the Jeep made them less safe. Others told me it was an eyesore. One guy even suggested I park it elsewhere, so it wouldn't bring down the property values. I ignored them. I had a job to do, and that job didn't end when I came home. The truth is, I'm rarely home for long. I rotate in and out of base, sometimes for weeks at a time, sometimes longer. When I'm gone, the Jeep stays. I keep it parked in front of the house like I'm supposed to. I don't block driveways. I don't make noise. I don't leave a mess. But no matter how careful I was, it always felt like the HOA was looking for a reason to pounce. They'd left me warnings about my trash cans once, because I brought them in too late after pickup. Another time, I got a written notice about unapproved patriotic displays. It was just an American flag in my yard. That one really stung. So yeah, there was tension. I knew it. They knew it. Still, I thought we had an understanding. As long as I wasn't breaking any rules, I figured they'd leave me alone. But I was wrong, because now my Jeep was gone, towed, taken without so much as a phone call. And if they thought they were just dealing with a parked car, well, they were about to find out how big of a mistake they made. Her name was Miss Green. She was the kind of HOA officer everyone talked about, but no one wanted to deal with directly. Mid-50s, sharp suits, hair always pulled back tight, and a clipboard like it was an extension of her hand. If you so much as let your grass grow half an inch too tall, she noticed, and she didn't give warnings. She gave fines. Miss Green was the unofficial queen of our neighborhood. Power wasn't just something she had, it was something she craved. She ran the HOA like it was her personal kingdom, and if you challenged her, she made sure you regretted it. The first time I met her, I was just moving in. I had my uniform on, still dusty from a long drive, and was trying to unload boxes before nightfall. She didn't say welcome, didn't offer a handshake. She walked up, pointed at my Jeep, and said, "Just so you know, oversized government vehicles aren't usually permitted on our streets." I calmly told her I had prior permission, that it was registered through the base. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue, just scribbled something in her notebook and walked away. That set the tone. From there it was a never-ending battle. Trash cans needed to be hidden immediately after pickup. Mailbox not the exact shade of beige. Citation: weeds in the sidewalk cracks. $50 fine. She once left a warning about a garden gnome. A garden gnome. But the worst was when I was deployed. She knew I was gone. Everyone did. The Jeep stayed parked, legally and properly, right in front of my home. But when I'd get back, I'd find notes taped to the windshield. Complaints, warnings. One even said I was inviting crime by making the neighborhood look militarized. I filed a complaint with the HOA board about her harassment. Never heard back. She had friends on the board, and I wasn't around long enough to fight it. So when I found out the Jeep was towed, I didn't need anyone to tell me who was behind it. Miss Green. It had her fingerprints all over it. The timing, the silence, the complete lack of warning. She knew I was gone. She knew I couldn't respond in time. And I wouldn't be surprised if she waited until I was off base, just to pull this. But what she didn't know, or maybe didn't care about, was that this wasn't just a personal vehicle. This was a federally protected, active-use military asset. Towing it without clearance wasn't just petty. It might have been illegal. I started digging. Emails, letters, board meeting records. And the more I looked, the more it seemed like this wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate, calculated. I wasn't the first person she'd targeted. And if I was right, this was about to get a whole lot worse for her than a complaint to the board. And she might have thought she could push people around. That uniforms and flags didn't matter. That she could do whatever she wanted because she had a clipboard and a title. But this time, she crossed a line, and she was about to pay for it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing my Jeep, my assigned vehicle, sitting in some random lot, surrounded by rusted sedans and broken down vans, exposed, unsecured, vulnerable. It wasn't just a vehicle to me. It was part of my work, my responsibility. If anything was tampered with, it wouldn't just be a personal loss. It could become a federal issue. First thing in the morning, I made calls, dozens. I chased down the towing company, finally got someone on the line who confirmed it. Yep, we have a matte green Jeep here, towed per HOA request. I asked for the address. They gave it. Then they hit me with the kicker. Daily storage fee is $145. Payment required before release. I was stunned. They were charging me for towing a vehicle they shouldn't have touched in the first place. I got in my car and drove straight there. The lot was fenced off with barbed wire. One of those places that looks like no one's been in or out in days. The Jeep was parked awkwardly in the corner, dusty and out of place, like it didn't belong there. I showed my ID, my military documents. They still refused. Sorry, sir. We've been instructed not to release the vehicle without written approval from the HOA. That's when my voice raised. I didn't yell, but I was on edge. I told them the vehicle was federal property, that withholding it was a serious mistake. They didn't care. They weren't listening. I walked back to my car, sat down, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely powerless. Not on deployment, not under pressure, but here back home, being blocked by some neighborhood officer, with a grudge and a phone call. I took a breath. Then I called base command. Within minutes, I was directed to legal affairs. I filed a formal federal notice. I submitted documents showing the Jeep's registry under active military use. I attached a copy of the HOA's prior approval. I even included Miss Green's citations, just to show the pattern. They took it seriously, and that gave me some relief, until the officer on the other end asked a quiet but serious question. Is there any indication the vehicle's equipment may have been accessed or damaged? I didn't know. I had no way of knowing. And that question changed everything. This wasn't just an inconvenience now. This was a possible breach. There were things in that Jeep, not weapons, nothing dangerous, but sensitive enough that the military had rules for handling and storage. I hung up and just stared at my phone. Anger, disbelief, helplessness. It all came crashing in at once. How had it come to this? I serve my country. I follow the rules. I do everything I'm supposed to. And somehow I'm the one fighting just to get my own vehicle back. And all because someone didn't like how it looked on the street. This wasn't about HOA guidelines anymore. This was personal. And I was going to make sure they realized just how far they'd overstepped. By the next day, I was done being polite. I marched straight to the HOA office. It was tucked inside a small building near the clubhouse, pretending to look helpful with fake plants and soft music. But I wasn't there for customer service. I was there for Miss Green. She was behind the front desk, typing something. When she looked up and saw me, her expression didn't change. Not surprise, not guilt, just smug calm, like she'd been expecting this. "Oh," she said, "you're back." I didn't sit. I didn't smile. "Why was my Jeep towed?" I asked flatly. She folded her hands. It violated the HOA's parking rules. No large or government vehicles may be left unattended on the street for more than 72 hours. I stared at her. "You know that's not true." "I have written permission. I sent it to the board. Twice." She shrugged. "Those agreements expire annually. And besides, you weren't here to discuss the renewal." My jaw tightened. Because I was on base, serving. The vehicle is on active federal registry. You can't just tow it. She gave a slow smile. "Rules are rules. If it's a problem, take it up with the board." She thought she won. That I was going to walk out, eat the fines, and never challenge her again. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have guessed, was that the situation had already left her hands. Because the moment I walked out of that office, military jurisdiction took over. An hour later, I got a call. The base had authorized immediate recovery action. Military police were en route to the towing lot, and they weren't coming to negotiate. I drove there too. When I pulled up, I saw 2 MPs already inside the gate, speaking to the manager. His hands were shaking. He kept looking from them to the clipboard in his hands, like he couldn't believe what he'd gotten caught up in. The Jeep was still there, untouched. That was the one good thing. The MPs had already made it clear. Releasing the vehicle wasn't optional. Keeping it was a federal offense. The tow company didn't even wait for paperwork. They handed over the keys on the spot. No fee, no forms, nothing. Just apologies and backpedaling. But it didn't stop there. Later that afternoon, another vehicle pulled into the HOA parking lot. A government sedan. 2 people in suits stepped out. Base legal reps, on orders to speak directly with the HOA leadership. It was quiet for about a day. Then word spread, like wildfire through the neighborhood. Miss Green had been called into an emergency meeting. I don't know what was said behind those doors, but I know how she looked afterward. Shaken, pale, lips tight. That smug calm, gone. Apparently, she'd received an official notice. She had overstepped her authority, by initiating the tow without confirming vehicle status, violating federal protocols regarding active military property. The HOA had been put on notice too. Failure to respect protections under the Service Members Civil Relief Act could carry serious consequences. But the biggest shift wasn't legal. It was personal. Neighbors started talking. A few came by my house. People who never said a word before, to say they'd heard what happened. Some admitted they'd had their own run-ins with Miss Green. One elderly veteran even said, "She did the same thing to me years ago. I just didn't have the fight in me." That's when I realized, this wasn't just about me. Miss Green had built her power on silence and fear. But this time, she pushed the wrong one. The fallout hit fast. 2 days after the confrontation, Miss Green was summoned for a formal interview with federal authorities. Not just the HOA board this time, but base legal, military investigators, and civilian oversight from the county office. They weren't messing around. She tried to play innocent, claimed she didn't know, that she was simply enforcing the rules, and wasn't aware the vehicle was still listed under active duty transport. But she didn't count on one thing: documentation. Not just mine, but hers. See, when I'd first moved in, and sent the HOA a copy of my military paperwork, I'd CC'd the entire board, including Miss Green. Months later, when she started leaving those petty citations on my Jeep, I responded again, restating the vehicle's status, and attaching proof, and she replied, in writing. She knew. She had known exactly what she was doing. She couldn't play dumb anymore. That email chain was forwarded directly to the investigators. It was all the proof they needed. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a choice. A deliberate, targeted action against a military service member's federally protected vehicle. The HOA board didn't even try to defend her. They were furious, not just because she broke rules, but because she exposed them to serious legal risk. Lawsuits, federal fines, maybe even criminal charges, depending on how far it went. By the end of the week, Miss Green was officially suspended pending investigation. No more clipboards, no more warning letters, no more smug smiles. For the first time, she wasn't in control. But the biggest twist came right after. That Saturday, while I was outside, checking over the Jeep, making sure nothing had been touched, a man from down the street walked over. Older, quiet, the kind of neighbor who mostly kept to himself. He told me he was retired Air Force. Then he said something that chilled me. She did the same thing to me a few years back. Towed my old service van while I was in the hospital for VA treatment. Said it was abandoned. I didn't have the energy to fight it. Another neighbor overheard and chimed in. Also former military. Same story. Citation after citation, leading to a forced removal. Always while they were away. Always when they couldn't respond in time. It was a pattern. A quiet one. Hidden behind policy, paperwork, and just enough plausible deniability to avoid attention. Until now, when I brought this to the investigators, they started digging deeper, asking questions, looking into past complaints. Turns out, Miss Green had a history of singling out military residents. She never said anything openly, never left anything that could get her fired outright. But the trend was there. Subtle hostility, harassment through red tape. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was systemic. The board began a full review of every enforcement action she'd filed over the last 3 years. Several were flagged for misconduct. Others were already being reversed. And for the first time in years, people in the neighborhood started speaking up. Veterans, reservists, even spouses of deployed service members who had stayed quiet for too long. They weren't angry anymore. They were done being silent. 2 weeks later, I received an official letter from the HOA, an apology, signed by the board president, not Miss Green, who was still suspended. They admitted the Jeep should never have been towed. They acknowledged my military documentation had been on file. They accepted responsibility. Along with the letter was a check, full reimbursement for the towing costs, storage fees, and a small additional amount they called a gesture of goodwill. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted them to admit what happened. The Jeep was fine. No damage, nothing missing. I'd had it inspected just in case. Everything checked out. But still, something felt different now. Like the trust I'd tried to build here had a crack running straight through it. A week after that, the HOA held a public meeting. For the first time, military families were invited to speak. And this time, the board actually listened. They announced new policies to protect active duty service members in the community. Vehicles with military registration could no longer be cited or towed without first confirming status with a designated liaison. HOA officers would be required to undergo training on the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and all future enforcement actions involving military residents had to be reviewed by the full board. No more single-person decisions. It was a step in the right direction. Still, I couldn't shake what had happened. It's strange really. You train for combat. You prepare for pressure, for danger, for risk. But you never expect the real fight to be in your own neighborhood. All it took was one person, one clipboard, one grudge, one abuse of power, and suddenly you're defending yourself in your own driveway. But here's what I learned. If you stay quiet, people like that win. But if you stand your ground, if you speak up, you might find you're not standing alone. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change things. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And please share this video to help raise awareness for our service members who face challenges, not just overseas, but right here at home. They deserve better.